I bought a 300 series. What I wish I knew about this vehicle, the problem's not here. It's not at this end of the vehicle. Let me show you. Well, this is where the problem is, up here under the bonnet in the engine. The fuel system, the fuel filter. It's not mounted just at the back of the car. What the engineers have done, they've put a fuel filter in the valley of the engine. I mean, who does that? Who designs a fuel filter and puts it in there? The turbos, it's a hot V, they're mounted there. The serviceability to get to it. Now, if you use this vehicle and you're planning on going touring and you may get contaminated fuel, it does happen. The price of this fuel filter, the inconvenience, the labour, and where they've located it, I don't know what they were thinking. But anyway, I mentioned price, sit down, it's $3,500. We've got paperwork, we've looked into it, and given the price on that, you really want to make sure you protect your investment. We've come up with a solution. Now let me show you what it is. All right, so I've just shown you the problem, and this is a solution we've come up with. Now, with almost 20 plus years working on Land Cruisers and own multiple Land Cruisers, this is the worst fuel filtration effort I've ever seen from Toyota, and what we've come up with is a pre-filter, 5 micron, like always, stainless steel bracketry, DIY kit. It's going to protect your 300 series, and today's video is all about DIY installation of a kit on your 300 series, so when you get your vehicle, you can protect it if you haven't done also already. You may ask yourself, fuel filter, I can see that, that's that bracket there. This guy here, what does that do? It's a two-piece design. It goes around the factory fuel filter. You may have heard me say Toyota have mounted the fuel filter at the back of the vehicle. That's their primary one. Second one's at the front. One set of instructions, some quality fuel hose, the promo stuff, fitting kits, nuts and bolts, lower bracket, bleeding hose, and our stainless steel mounting bracket. As you can see, it's all solid as a rock. So being a mechanic for 20 plus years and having to service Land Cruisers, I know how important it is to be able to change fuel filters on the side of the road when you need to, and that's why we've designed the bracket two-piece. The fuel filter has got full protection. Where we're going to mount it, it's not exposed to gravel and road rash and all those elements. Now, it's got tools that you have in your factory car to be able to change the fuel filter on the roadside. That's very important to me, as well as a clear sight bowl. You can see in here visually if you've got contaminated fuel. You can also crack this valve here and drain it. So simplicity and functionality in a rock solid kit that's going to protect your 300 series. Okay, so the most important part of this kit is the instructions, color picture instructions. We've got full contents here, tools that you're going to need to achieve to finish the job. As you can see, big color pictures. No one wants to do heaps of reading. We've made it easy. We know what it's like to install products, and we want it to be easy so you guys can get it on your car, really time savvy in your driveway. You don't have to have a workshop like I do here. You can do it in your workshop at home. Okay, so here we are under the 300 series, the factory fuel filter. This is the one I was telling you about. See how it's hanging lower than the chassis rail. It's pretty vulnerable and exposed out here. There's no protection guard. We talked about a protection guard, but more on that later in another video. This one is about the fuel kit. Where we're going to mount our third fuel filter is right here. It's going to be serviceable. Now you're asking yourself, 3 fuel filters? Why? The reason is the cost of that one at the front, $3.5 grand. You heard me say that earlier. This guy here, the cost of this filter is very expensive. Now, if you look at the housing, try and imagine trying to service that on the roadside when you've got contaminated fuel. Toyota in their manual say to take that whole assembly out of the vehicle with all the connectors, and you're going to see in the video how much more work is involved in that. Our fuel kit, roadside, serviceable, clear bowl, easy to service, cost-effective service changeability with the filters, 5 micron filtration. That's why we've got it there, and it's got protection with the stainless steel guard, so you're not going to get any rocks, rash, anything coming off the rear tyre. It's going to hit it, and you can service it roadside, peace of mind, really cost-effective filtration. It's going to look after your engine for years to come. So let's get into it. So quick tip, we're going to remove the factory spare tyre. So we're going to drop that down. That's going to make it much easier to get to the factory fuel filter. We're also in this video, just so you can really see what we're doing, we're going to take off this rear driver's wheel just for camera angles. So let's jump straight into it, get this wheel right out of the way. So here's the factory fuel filter. You can clearly see it now. This bottom bowl here is the serviceable part of it. This is that plastic cover that Toyota put on. So what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect all the fuel lines, connectors, you're going to take it off. Toyota stipulate when you change this fuel filter, you need to take this out of the vehicle. That's how they say it in the manual. Yes, you might be able to do it on roadside, but you need to make sure you don't break that plastic housing. I can't really see it being a serviceable item on roadside. You're asking yourself, 3 fuel filters, why are we putting a third one in? Well, I mentioned the one at the front in the engine, $3,500, no stock. Now this guy at the back here, the genuine Toyota one, let alone being extremely hard to change roadside, you imagine getting a tool to change that, you're running the risk of damaging the plastic housing. You wouldn't want to crack that roadside because you're definitely not going anywhere. Now, it is exposed here. We'll get into that further in the video, but cost of this fuel filter, it's $165, and you've got to find someone that's got it in stock. The fuel filter kit, the fuel manager range that we use, we're running a 5 micron. We're going to have it as a pre-filter straight from the tank. It's going to be easy to access. It's got a clear sight bowl, and as you can see, you can't see any quality of fuel separation. You can't see anything. You've got to take it off to check it. Now, Toyota, they don't change this in the service regime regularly. We recommend if you're using the vehicle for off-road or around town, at least check it visually. If not, drain it. Our kit is designed to be serviceable, easy access, and get this, the filter is $50. So the choice is yours. Which one would you prefer to replace and how often? Better yet, if you're traveling, which one would you take a spare with? $3,500? No way. $160? Maybe. $50 every day of the week. It's cheap insurance to make sure your fuel system is protected for a long time to come. Okay, so first up, remove some trim clips and Torx bits so we can gain access to place the fuel filter and bracket in here. Okay, so there's just one little trim clip here. You can pull this guy out. You've just got to squeeze, little tab there, and this comes out. This is what the Torx bit was mounted into. So you're just going to remove that. What that's going to do, it's just going to pop this trim out here, and it's going to give us a lot more access to feed the fuel filter, the complete assembly in as one unit. So fuel systems, before you work on it, mentioned it earlier, make sure you clean the surrounding area that you're going to open up because you definitely don't want to get any contaminants into the fuel system from anything you're doing. Now it's time to prep the fuel head, this guy right here, onto the main bracket. Before we bolt it up onto the chassis rail, we're also going to cut the fuel hose to length. That's all documented in the instructions. Got the hose clamps and all the hardware to make it all come together. So a quick tech tip, the fuel fittings, we've already sealed them in there. The reason is we don't send you the fittings and the fuel head and you have to put it in there because we want to make sure it doesn't suck air. Now saying that, air in a diesel, we all know it gives us fuel starvation, starting issues. Now the fuel filter, when you go to change these guys, there's an O-ring at the bottom. Make sure that O-ring stays on the glass bowl, doesn't stick to the bottom of the filter. You discard this filter in service and you screw it up without the O-ring, it will suck air and it will cause you problems. So make sure if you're changing the fuel filter, keep an eye on that. Now the glass bowl, so you can visually check the fuel quality in your vehicle. It also has a little cock valve. You can loosen this off and it's in a serviceable location. You can easily get to it. There is also another little rubber seal and O-ring at the bottom there. So make sure that that guy there is in serviceable condition if you do undo it or do it up. This here, the ring, the locking ring that holds the filter up. You're going to hear it lock. It's got a little arrows back and forth, lefty loosey, righty tighty. That collar drops down. You are literally just going to pull the filter down. And now there is a key here. And then you are going to see the keyway in the body, the fuel head. That guy there lines up. Collar slides up. It's a coarse thread. And you're going to hear it click right now when it's tight. That's done. Now the glass bowl, same thing. Oh, O-rings, that's what I'm talking about. You've got to make sure it's in the right spot. Okay, that is all ready to go. That's how you change the fuel filter. A couple little things to keep an eye on your fuel kit in its service life. So let's crack on, bolt this straight up. Okay, so fuel head on the bracket, they're going to mount like this. The reason I've situated them like this is I'm following the instructions in the same orientation. We're just going to put the bolts, finger tight there. Away we go. These are all metric headed bolts as well, so Toyota run metric bolts, so do we. Okay, so fuel filter is mounted on the bracket. You'll see we've got play. You can move the filter around. The great thing is with this is if you have got other aftermarket accessories, there is movement there. However, you just need to slide the filter in factory form furthest away. It's noted that in the instructions, so you'll see here, like that, furthest away, and we're going to tighten it up in situation there. With the hose clamps, when we position them and tighten them up, don't put them in a position where you cannot get to them to service them. There's nothing worse than trying to do something off the car, bolt it on the car, and then you've got to retake the item off the vehicle to tighten one hose clamp. Position it where you can service it in situ. Okay, so we're just going to measure the hose, 850 mark. It's one hose. That's 850. Now we're going to do 830 mil. Okay, so the 830 mil, just to recap, goes onto port 2, this one here closest to the bracket. This is all pictured in the instructions. Push them right up on the barbs, so you see the hose is coming right up here. Now we're just going to feed the hose clamps on. Now before you feed this all the way up and you go, oh, hang on, I want it to be that way, and you're going to take it back off. Situate it where you want, run back down the hose, and then straight back up. Job done. There's nothing worse. Obviously, this is a little short run of hose. There's nothing worse than getting it where you want it, and then you realise, oh, hang on, the clamp's 180 degrees out. So just a small flat blade screwdriver. We're going to position them. So this is the orientation of the hose clamps with the fuel filter assembly fitted to the vehicle. In the correct position, rotate them. So like I mentioned, in the vehicle, you can access them and service them if required. Okay, so all the prep work's pretty much done on the bench now. Just need to grab 2 large bolts, our washers, these guys here, and we're going to start bolting up in the vehicle. We've got 2 nuts, 2 washers, and we have got an extra one here as well. Okay, so mounting hardware, what have we got? We've got an M12 and a washer. This guy here goes through the stainless steel bracketry. Then on the inside of the chassis rail, we have the large stainless steel washer, M12 nut. That's going to bolt that up. The furthest hole away from the fuel filter, we've got an M10 with a washer and a large stainless steel washer. That goes through the hole, through the chassis rail. Another large stainless steel washer on the inside, M10 nylock nut. Chassis rails mounted through here. Factory fuel filters here. So let's get it in the car and show you it all mounted up in position, and we can run through that again with some arrows and just really make sure you're confident in fitting this kit at home. Okay, so the fuel hoses are the first thing we're going to feed through, and they're just going to come through the back here. So we're going to start feeding them up here, over there, and then later on we're going to pass them through when we plumb it up to the fuel system. But we just need to do that first, so then we can locate the bracket into position. Okay, so we're just going to lower the plastic guards, slightly move them out of the way, rotate the fuel head, roll it into position. The fuel hoses are full and where they need to go. Now it's just a matter of lining up the holes through the wheel arch with our washers and doing up the nylock bolts that we mentioned on the bench earlier. Okay, so M12, just going to slide that guy straight into there, through the chassis rail. Just started that by finger, got it in position, and now we're going to do the M10 at the front. M10 washer, large stainless steel washer, straight through the hole, through the chassis. On the inside, large washer, nylock. We're going to get that into position as well. So tips in getting this one into position is just slide it up, then slide this nut into position as well. Just pull the bolt out a little bit, just enough to get it started. Back through. Then you can use an open-ended spanner and tighten it up without having to remove all this factory fuel filter. And there you have it. That's all just loosely sitting in place. You can move it all around, check all your clearances. Like I said earlier, all the holes have got a slight little bit of play in them, so you can move it around for aftermarket accessories or however you see fit with different accessories you've fitted on your vehicle. As you'll see, this car's got airbags, so it's got air lines that are run around here. If you've got other wiring harnesses and stuff, you may need to situate the fuel bracket so that everything works together. Now we can go along, tighten it up once you're happy there. Bracket here is all done, and then we can move on with plumbing the fuel system up and putting the lower guard on. Okay, so I've mentioned heaps about making the kit serviceable. This is what I'm talking about, is when we come up here, your access goes straight through here. You can undo that tab that I showed you on the bench. You can drain the cock valve at the bottom. You can visually see the quality of the fuel. You can drain it as well. Serviceability was a massive design tick for us when we made this kit up. So that's one of those purpose, function, all those things above. That's why we recommend this kit for your 300 series. Okay, so we talk about clearances. You'll see up here the bracket to the bodywork. You need to make sure there's clearance along there, and you can see the bracket can move. Remembering the fuel kit is mounted to the chassis and the body is rubber mounted to the chassis. They do move independently, so just make sure you've got clearance there as well. Okay guys, if your spanner's a little bit too fat and it won't fit up here, so you can just slide that straight up. So you can do this no-lock nut straight up. You can just loosen off the factory 12mm bolt here, from the top here, and you'll see this bracket here, the factory one, there's a little bit of movement in it. So you can just slide that, gives you a little bit more working room, makes the job simple as. Okay, so just a quick recap on the fuel filtration kit and mounting it to the chassis rail. We did loosen these off, gives us more access through here, so it's up to you. If your spanner's too thick, doesn't fit in there, you can do that. You'll set nicely. Needs to be tightened back up. The two bolts that are mounting the fuel kit to the chassis rail, this one here, the nylock nuts on the inside. They just need to be done up tight enough that the fuel kit is securely mounted in situation. Clearances, we've checked all that. Fuel hoses, they're clearing everything at the back here. They'll just be getting fed over the spare wheel carrier here, and now we'll be taking off this bit of fuel hose here and teeing in the fuel system to the factory fuel filter. Okay, so to get these hose clamps off, you'll see here, just using long nose pliers. You can use normal pliers, whatever's going to work for you. Now just a simple twist on the hose. The reason I'm doing that is I'm just breaking the seal between the rubber hose and the metal pipe, and now the hose will slide off easy. If you just try and pull on it, the two sort of stick together. So it's a little trick and the hose will come off much easier. Okay, so now to get the plumbing orientation correct, I'm just going to run through it. Port 1 is this hose here. That is the hose furthest away from the stainless steel bracketry. So at the back of the vehicle, this guy here, port 1, that is going to plumb up to the factory fuel filter right here. So it's just going to loop around, airfire hose clamp straight on there. Okay, so connecting the fuel hoses, the right orientation is very important. So this metal fuel hose here is the fuel tank, and that is going to connect to port 2. So port 2 from the fuel filter is going to connect here. Port 1 is going to connect into the factory fuel filter. Make sure you get them around the right way so the fuel flow is correct. And just to recap on that, when you look up here, port 1 is the furthest away from the stainless steel bracketry, so towards the rear of the vehicle, and port 2 is the closest to the front of the vehicle and closest to the stainless steel bracketry. That's the orientation. Just make sure you follow that in the instructions and you won't go wrong. So not much diesel come out of there, pulled it off the factory fuel filter. I raised it up so we could flow the fuel back to the tank. Now we'll connect those hoses up. Okay, so first one I'm going to connect is port 1, which is the furthest away at the fuel head at the back. I'm just going to put on my hose clamp, push on my hose, rotate my clamp, and I'm going to do that guy right up there. And this hose here is going to connect port 2 up to the factory metal hard line that feeds from the tank. And see, I've got the clamp there as well. Now you'll notice where I've got the orientations of the clamp. Remember the spare wheel comes through here. Okay, so as you can see here, two hose clamps, the orientation of them, with a screwdriver right here, I can get straight to them really easy. I can tighten them, remove them, any access from a service point of view, really simple and easy to do in situ. Okay, so we're back up in the engine bay. Now, near the airbox, between the airbox and the engine, you're going to see where you fill the engine oil, the yellow dipstick. You've got the factory primer pump here, the lift pump from the tank to the engine, but you've also got this little bleed nipple, and we're going to take that off. So that's going to come off like so. It's just a little thumb and forefinger, squeeze together, lift up, place that somewhere that you're not going to drop it in the engine bay. Then in the kit, we have this pink hose. What that's actually for is sliding onto just like this. Don't have to put it on all the way, just enough till it seals. Fuel hose. The reason we've got this is so that we can catch the diesel that when we pump the lift pump from the rear of the vehicle through all the fuel filters. And then we've got a container, this one here, okay, it's a Gatorade bottle, water bottle, something to catch the diesel so you can then dispose of the diesel appropriately. However, if you are on the roadside and you did need to change the fuel filter, look, if you don't have the hose, you don't have a bottle, you've got to do what you've got to do. You pump it till you get the diesel up, until you get out of the situation you're in. However, we're in a controlled environment, we've got the hose, we can dispose of the diesel, and we're not going to put diesel everywhere in the engine bay, so there's less cleanup in the end result. So let's get on. We're going to pump this. You'll see diesel straight away, it's going to come through. You can see here, air bubbles coming through as we pump it. Now watch, you're going to see an air pocket come through very soon. It's going to lift up the diesel that was in the fuel line and the factory fuel filter. And then you're going to see more air come through as we have to prime the extra fuel filter we put in the system. So we've literally put 600 mils of diesel has come through from the tank. Obviously we've got the fuel line that's come from the rear of the vehicle to the front, so we're going to suck all that diesel out, discard it, and then we're going to get a large air pocket, so that's going to come up in a second. Okay, so we've got the red hose connected here. We removed the factory little bleed nipple off the top here. We've got our bottle to discard the excess diesel that we're going to discard once we've bled it. So first of all, we're going to pump it through, and it'll be about 20 pumps going to come through. We've already done one bottle of this already, so as you can see here now, that's a good little spot too to leave a bottle if you want. It holds itself there. It's a little trick rather than having diesel in it and it falls over and makes a right mess in the engine bay, so that little spot works well. Now you're going to see the diesel, as I'm pumping it, getting a lot of air coming through the tube, and you can hear the air too. Hopefully you can hear that. Now I've just got to keep pumping, and what we're going to do is pull the diesel from the tank through the filter we've just fitted, through the factory fuel filter, and then all the way through the fuel lines back up to the front here. Once we've bled all of the air out of the lines, we're going to remove the little bit of pink hose, red hose we've got up here, refit the factory bleed nipple, 2 pumps on the lift pump just to make sure we've got it right up, and then ready to start the vehicle. Still got air coming through just through here as well. You'll see air coming through. As I pump it, watch, it's a little bit foamy. You want to make sure that when it's coming through, you've got no air bubbles. That means the fuel system has no air pockets in it, and you're not going to get any rough idling, hard starting issues. Okay, so here we go. You can see the pink tube. There's no air bubbles in here. I've just removed the container so you can see it. As I've done the last pumps, no air bubbles have bled through the hose, so I know I've got a good supply of fuel up to the engine. Now Toyota state as well, 120 to 150 pumps from when the air pocket is in the system. So the initial bit of fuel is going to come through like you saw in the video. Once that's gone through, you are going to get an air pocket, 120 to 150 pumps off the factory lift pump. Now, it is a lot of pumps. However, roadside, you don't have compressed air or primer bulbs or anything like that. Now, the reason that we've given you this tube as well to connect on here is because we don't want to put anything that's going to damage this barb, because the little nipple that you put back on there, if that doesn't seal properly or isn't back on the vehicle, you are going to get air in the fuel system and you're going to have a whole nother set of problems. It's not going to run properly, so make sure you don't lose that little nipple. That, like I said earlier, when you take it off, put it somewhere safe. Okay, so tips, removing this as well. If you put your finger on this end here, it'll airlock the hose so that when you have the hose on here, obviously there's no diesel at the moment, but when you put the finger on the end, it'll cause a vacuum. You'll be able to lift this up, block that off. You're not going to get diesel everywhere. Now another little tip, you don't need to push it all the way down to the bottom. You only just need to get it just on enough that it stays on there. Okay, so to remove the tube, just put my finger over the end of it, thumb and forefinger down here. I'm going to pick up the hose like that, hold that, and then once again, we've got the little bleed nipple. Away we go. Last couple of pumps on the lift. Okay, so we've got 3 bottles here. You don't need 3 bottles to bleed the system. The first one here was the fuel that's come through the fuel line from the tank originally until we got air in the system. These 2 here is the amount of fuel we've pulled through, the factory fuel filter and the filter we've fitted, and all the fuel lines until we've got all the air out of the fuel line, the supply, up to the engine so it can start freely with no air pockets. So you don't need 3 containers. I just wanted to show you that's how much diesel we've taken out of the tank. So now you can safely discard that and move on with the rear of the vehicle. Okay, so now we've bled the fuel system up. We've put the bleed nipple back on. We're going to start the vehicle up, and once the vehicle's started and we've assessed that it's idling well and we haven't got any air in the system and it's running as normal, we're also going to check down the back of the vehicle, check for any diesel leaks, anything like that, even around up the front here as well. Once we're all happy with that and the fuel system's A1, then we're going to put the trims back together and the lower guard on the fuel filter, and we're just about done with the fuel kit installation. Okay, so just like that, the engine's started. It all sounds perfectly normal like it did before we put the fuel kit in there. So now it's time to head down the back and button up the back end, and we're just about job done. Okay, so we're at the back of the car now and we've got the fuel filter. You can see the diesel in the fuel filter right here, and you can see it's clean diesel. There's no water separation, and like I mentioned, with a clear bowl, roadside, at any point in time, you can duck your head under here. You can see if you've got contaminated fuel, you can drain it. You can service the fuel filter like I mentioned before. It's very easy, it's cost effective. So, and better yet, we're just checking our work as well. We're making sure up the top, no diesel leaks, fuel lines are all good, factory fuel filter, no leaks, everything's well and truly secured. We're all done here. Lastly, all we're going to do is put on the lower pan. So we'll grab that now and we'll bolt it straight up. Okay, so 2 M6 bolts and 2 6mm nuts. The bracket, 2 holes. It's going to bolt onto the bottom of the fuel bracket here. We're going to put this edge here on the outside edge. The reason is if you have any impact, you've got the M6 bolts here as well as the edge here on the inside of the guard supporting it. So it goes on the outside. However, you can put it there, but this is where we've designed it as a shield. Now, those 2 there, 2 M6 nuts, 10 mils back and front. Just tighten them up by hand. That sits there nicely. We'll get those guys tight right now. So end result, guards here. You can still put your hand around, service the fuel filter, drain the valve. You can come in here with a light, you can inspect it. And now we're going to put the mud flap, inner wheel arch back together. Spare wheel's going to go on. And just like that, fuel system installation is complete. Okay, so now you can see how you can protect the fuel system on your 300 series. If you're after one of these kits, get in touch with us. Until next time, I'll see you out on the tracks. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe so you get notifications of our next video. Until next time, see you out there.